Chapter 50. The time had come, and all the guests had arrived. Yidachuan stood up and toasted them. He first said some pleasantries like, "It's my honor that everyone has come," before getting straight to the point. He was furious and sorrowful. "I've invited everyone here this time because of something that has to do with the survival of our Qingyang city. That's right, it's the cancer that is the Black Wind stronghold. The bandits of the Black Wind Mountain are extremely vicious and have committed countless crimes. They've stolen so much silver cough, who knows how many people they've killed." He was extremely furious that the bandits were actually richer than him, the district magistrate. The advisor kicked him under the table, and he coughed gently and changed his words in a hurry. "Now, they want to slaughter the Crouching Ox village. As the local magistrate of Qingyang City, I can't tolerate this. Everyone must have heard of the person beside me, the descended tiger, Li Qingshan." He placed special emphasis on his renowned nickname, the descended tiger, which made the corner of Li Qingshan's eye twitch. "This young hero is also the sheriff of me, or even the entire Qingyang city. Not only did he personally kill the third boss of the Black Wind stronghold and several dozen bandits, but he also wants to destroy the entire Black Wind stronghold right now. I hope everyone can contribute money and effort to make this happen. Only then will he not let down the heavens and the earth." With that, he drank all the alcohol in his cup. Qingyang City did not have any soldiers for the district magistrate to deploy. Even the bailiffs were old, weak, sick, and disabled. However, the large clans all had large courtyards with high walls and many guards. As a result, most of the security of Qingyang City was actually maintained by the Iron Fist Gang. If he wanted to deploy soldiers, he could only borrow people from the aristocrats. As long as each family provided 4 or 5 people, it would basically meet District Magistrate Ye's expectations. However, the aristocrats were unable to drink anymore. They looked at one another. Was the District Magistrate serious this time? Asking for money was normal. Which district magistrate did not need money? However, asking for people was not normal. Apart from the previous few district magistrates who would walk around the mountains with a group of people after receiving money, the latter district magistrates did not even bother putting on any airs. They just said the timing was not right. As for when the timing was right, only the heavens knew. The restaurant was in an uproar. The aristocrats did not even want to fork out money, let alone people. If they died or were injured, they would have to spend money to comfort them. Furthermore, they had offended the Black Wind stronghold. Who knew where Crouching Ox village was? Whether it was destroyed or not had nothing to do with them. It was not like the Black Wind stronghold could touch them, and there would be endless deaths of other people's children. A middle-aged gentleman who looked to be in his 40s or 50s said, "Lord Yi, we all understand your concern for the common people. We can't just watch and do nothing. We have to do something. However, it's impossible for us to send people. Even if we agree, the guards won't agree." He very implicitly stated his position. "Seeing that you have the strength now, everyone can give you some money as a token. You take this money and stay here obediently. Don't cause trouble for us. I'm finally going to get money." Yidachuan felt that this was a bit unbelievable. He really wanted to pinch his thigh to see whether he was dreaming or not. Ever since he became the district magistrate, he had been asking for money everywhere, but no one took him seriously. He could not even ask for a single tael of silver. Success always came too suddenly. Yidachuan calmed himself down and glanced at Li Qingshan. He began to consider whether he should stop while he was ahead. Li Qingshan frowned. He could not blame these aristocrats for being selfish. Most people were like that. Coupled with the actions of the previous district magistrates, it was already rare for them to be willing to pay. Since he could not use this power, there was no need to force it. He said, "Then thank you all. Father, don't give him money." A young man stomped up the stairs and stared at Li Qingshan fiercely. Li Qingshan immediately remembered that this was the young man who had raced on the road and knelt down to give him money. Why did he suddenly become so bold? Was he relying on the presence of the adults? "Don't mess around. This is not a place for you. Leave." The middle-aged aristocrat berated. However, the young man did not back down. Instead, he said arrogantly, "My senior brothers are here." The people from the Dragon's Gate sect are here. One of the aristocrats shouted. His voice was filled with surprise. My son practices martial arts there. Yeah, me too. The aristocrats were overjoyed. They whispered to each other, rejoicing that someone stood up for them and that they did not have to pay this sum of money. However, Li Qingshan's expression suddenly turned cold. The humiliation he suffered on the mountain path that day came back to him. A group of people of all ages came up the stairs. All of them were dressed in white and carried swords. They gathered together and looked as if there was no one else around. It was truly an awe-inspiring sight. The person in the lead was the young master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yang Jun. Magistrate, you invited everyone to the banquet. Why did you ignore the Dragon's Gate sect? Are you looking down on us? Yang Jun looked around. When he saw Lu Hong, he nodded his head slightly. It could barely be considered a greeting. When he saw Li Qingshan, his eyes lit up. Then he exploded with extreme hatred. You really are here. It took us a long time to find you. You were looking for me? Li Qingshan found it strange. Looking at the other party's expression, it was as if he had deeply offended them. However, since they had delivered themselves to his doorstep, he would not let them go easily. It was a pity that he did not have the great spear with him. Otherwise, who knew how many people would die or be injured with a sweep of the spear? I only regret not killing you with one slash. Today, I will make you spit out everything you ate. Yang Jun looked at Li Qingshan like he was looking at a mortal enemy. He knew that the spirit ginseng had been taken by Li Qingshan, so he immediately flew into a rage. The spirit ginseng had missed him by a hair's breadth and ended up in this country bumpkin's hands. Although the spirit ginseng could not be digested so easily, it had definitely lost most of its medicinal properties after such a long time. Otherwise, how could this country bumpkin have the strength to kill the Black Wind Stronghold's third boss? That should have been his. In his eyes, Li Qingshan was an extremely despicable and hateful thief. Li Qingshan had stolen something that belonged to him, so how could he not gnash his teeth in hatred? He would definitely cut Li Qingshan to pieces. Ida Chuan stood up in a hurry. Young hero Yang, let's talk this out. Qingshan is this county's constable. How can you shout about killing him? When he saw the Dragon's Gate sect coming at him aggressively with all of them wielding swords, he immediately felt weak. As the saying went, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. When the swords came stabbing at him, no matter how skilled Li Qingshan was, how was he supposed to block them? Yang Jun said with a dark expression, Lord District Magistrate, this person stole something extremely important from our Dragon's Gate sect. We are here today to apprehend him. Please do not stop us. Otherwise, be careful that swords are blind. Then, without waiting for his reply, Yang Jun ordered, take him down. He was extremely arrogant and despotic. Then he smiled sinisterly. Don't kill him. I will slowly interrogate him about the whereabouts of the item. The dozen or so people pressed forward, and the aristocrats moved to the sides with a whoosh. The district magistrate and the advisor fled, and only Lu Hong was left at the large round table, drinking leisurely. Among those present, only Lu Hong understood Li Qingshan's strength the best. However, the relationship between Iron Fist and the Dragon's Gate sect could be deduced from Yang Jun's attitude just now. Iron Fist took the path of the lower class, accepting disciples from the common folk. Meanwhile, the Dragon's Gate sect took the path of the upper class, and most of their disciples were from wealthy families. Although they were not as incompatible as fire and water, they had never seen eye to eye with each other. That was why he refused to say a word of warning. He could not wait for more people from the Dragon's Gate sect to die, especially that arrogant and despotic Yang Jun who disrespected him. However, he was also guessing what the important item was. He seemed to have heard some rumors. Chapter 51. Qingshan stood at the window like a lone pine tree, as if he did not see the Dragon Gate sect disciples approaching. Dragon Gate sect knows that I have the spirit ginseng. Who told you? Huang Bingu? To think that I saved your life. The anger of being betrayed rose within him, but the corners of his mouth slowly curled up, revealing his white teeth. Lu Hong's heart skipped a beat as he watched from the side. What a heavy killing intent. Bang! He lifted his leg and kicked the heavy square table in front of him. The square table was wide and big, and it could accommodate at least 10 people. It was made of jujube wood and weighed more than 100 kilograms. It was sent flying by his kick, and with an extremely fierce momentum, it crashed into the disciples of the dragon sect. Cheetah was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. He didn't even think that there would be such a move. He looked at the square table coming at him in shock. His reaction was fast. He immediately abandoned his sword and waved his palm. He circulated all the inner force in his body and slapped the square table. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Li Qingshan sneered. Qi Da's arms broke at the same time, and his chest caved in from the impact of the square table. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and at the same time, the sound of bones cracking rang out. The square table did not stop moving. It carried 7 or 8 Dragon Gate sect disciples with it, smashing through the railing and falling down the stairs with a loud crash. There were guests downstairs as well. When they saw the Dragon Gate sect disciples going up the stairs majestically and murderously, they were wondering who was going to be unlucky. They craned their necks to watch the show. Suddenly, they saw a table and 7 or 8 Dragon Gate sect disciples fall down, and they screamed and fled. It was only when the table fell to the ground that they surrounded Cheetah, still in a state of shock. When they saw that Cheetah was no longer breathing, they saw that the other Dragon Sect disciples did not die on the spot because Cheetah blocked them. However, their tendons and bones were broken from the impact, and they groaned in pain. They were all dumbfounded. When had they ever seen a Dragon Gate disciple like this? Who was upstairs? For some reason, Li Qingshan thought of bowling. Those Dragon Gate disciples were all dressed in white. Didn't they look like bowling pins? Unfortunately, they did not hit all of them. As the remaining 5 or 6 Dragon Gate disciples were closer to the side, they did not hit the table. However, they were covered in cold sweat from the shock. They stood there in a daze, not knowing how to react. These disciples of rich families practiced martial arts and had never experienced a real battle. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Almost no one could react to it. In that instant, the situation reversed. The initially aggressive Dragon's Gate sect was wiped out in the blink of an eye. Only Lu Hong was able to clearly see Li Qingshan's movements. He had a grave expression on his face as he thought about whether or not he would be able to block it, and whether or not he would be able to dodge it. His conclusion was worrisome, and his brows furrowed even tighter. The mocking smile on his face deepened. Today, he had lost a lot of face to Li Qingshan, but now he seemed to have regained a lot of it. Li Qingshan ignored the others and strode towards Yang Jun. Yang Jun was lying on the ground. Li Qingshan had kicked the square table at him earlier. However, with the Dragon's Gate disciples blocking the way, he had time to react. At the critical moment, he lay on the ground and escaped the disaster. Even now, he still could not believe what had happened. The people he had brought were all experts in the sect. There were 3 third-rate experts among them, and the others were rare experts. However, more than half of them had died in a single move. His act of denouncing Xiao Chen had become an extremely ironic joke. As he watched Li Qingshan approach, he suddenly thought of the dozens of mountain bandits who had died in Li Qingshan's hands. He thought of the terrifying infamy of the person before him and remembered that his martial arts were far from enough. He drew his sword in a frenzy. Kill him! One sword stabbed at Li Qingshan. At the same time, 5 swords flashed with cold light as they stabbed at Li Qingshan from the front, back, left, and right. The stunned Dragon's Gate disciples reacted as well. They were fellow disciples who practiced together all year round. Although they did not have much actual combat experience, their teamwork was not bad. The speed of this attack was exactly the same, trapping Li Qingshan in a net of swords. Be careful of the sword formation. Li Long shouted a warning, but it was already too late. At the same time, 6 swords stabbed into Li Qingshan's body. Delight appeared on the faces of the owners of the swords. They did not expect it to work so easily. Our Dragon's Gate sect's sword formation is indeed extraordinary. It was unknown whether it was mockery or pity on Lu Hong's face. He was too inexperienced and had too little experience in fighting in the Jianghu. He was supposed to win, but he gave his opponents the perfect opportunity to surround and attack him. He had dug his own grave. However, the fall of every young talent caused a veteran like him to feel regret. He also felt somewhat relaxed. He wanted to proudly say, "Look, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. The strongest might not be able to live to the end." The tip of the sword stabbed into the skin by an inch and could not go any further. The swordsman's delighted expressions turned into shock. They exerted strength madly, but they only bent the tough swords. Lu Hong was shocked. Could it be that he has already trained his external defensive martial arts to the point where he is impervious to weapons? Furthermore, a fine steel sword infused with inner force was not something that ordinary weapons could compare to. This youth had given him too many surprises. Li Qingshan said slowly, "No wonder people say that 2 fists cannot defeat 4 hands. Such a combined attack is no weaker than a full-powered strike from a peerless expert." A strange red light that was hard to see with the naked eye flowed in his eyes. "However, how can such weak and powerless swords injure me?" His quintessence spewed out, and his swords shattered. All the swordsmen were sent flying back, vomiting blood. However, only faint white marks were left on Li Qingshan's skin. Yang Jun felt an extremely surging quintessence rush into his body. The inner force that he had cultivated for so many years could not stop it at all. It rampaged through his body, tearing his tendons and meridians apart. Just as Yang Jun was about to fall off the building, a figure flashed and appeared behind him. With a wave of his sleeve, Yang Jun landed steadily on the ground. Li Qingshan's expression turned grave and vigilant. Although he saw the person's movements clearly, he could not keep up with such a movement technique. Although his defense was shockingly high, his speed was his weakest point. Yang Anji grabbed Yang Jun's pulse with a cold expression. Yang Jun's meridians were in a mess. His martial arts could be considered crippled. Yang Jun called out "Father," and fainted. Yang Anji looked at Li Qingshan again. His eyes were filled with a terrifying killing intent, and he no longer looked like a scholar. His heart was filled with hatred and regret. He had come to the restaurant earlier, but he thought that Yang Jun and his disciples would be enough to capture Li Qingshan. If he had seen Lu Hong, it would have been rather difficult for him to speak. As a result, he had remained hidden in the restaurant the entire time, just in case. However, he never thought the situation would change so quickly. From the moment Li Qingshan kicked away the square table and cleared out half of the Dragon's Gate disciples, he wanted to take action, but Li Qingshan fell into the sword formation right afterwards. He was doomed. Even Lu Hong, someone who had witnessed the power of Li Qingshan's martial arts, believed that Li Qingshan was dead for sure, let alone him. As a result, he stopped himself, but it was already too late. Lu Hong chuckled. "Brother Yang, long time no see. Why have you suddenly caused such a great disturbance? What's the reason?" Li Qingshan saw that Yang Anji bore some resemblance to Yang Jun, and from what Lu Hong had said, he knew that the person before him was the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, the greatest of the martial arts society of Qingyang. After all, Yang Anji had been in Jianghu for many years, so he had a firm will. Unlike those rich disciples, he immediately put down his son and didn't even look at Lu Hong. Instead, he said to Li Qingshan, "I originally wanted to persuade you to hand over the item. I didn't intend to hurt you, but now I've changed my mind. My son has no enmity with you, so why are you so ruthless?" Towards the end of his words, he couldn't hold back his monstrous anger. Hearing this, Li Qingshan laughed. "You don't plan to hurt me? No grudges?" If his martial arts were slightly weaker and he fell into Yang Jun's hands, he wouldn't know how much torture and humiliation he would suffer. On the mountain path, the threat and humiliation from a superior expert might not be considered as enmity. Perhaps Yang Jun felt extremely wronged. "Yes, I only said a few words to you. I didn't really chop off your hand." Chapter 52. The Dragon's Gate sect was arrogant and overbearing, but in everyone's eyes, Li Qingshan was 10 times more arrogant and overbearing than the Dragon's Gate sect. With a single sentence, he had decided the fates of the two great organizations of the Jianghu that had occupied Qingyang for a very long time. However, Yang Anji's face no longer showed any anger. He recovered the calmness and rationality that a swordsman should possess. Based on his instincts, he had determined that Li Qingshan was one of the few powerful opponents he would face in his life. However, he had absolute confidence. His agile and graceful movement technique countered Li Qingshan's external martial arts the most, just like how Li Qingshan countered Lu Hong's iron fists. No matter how great his strength was, it was useless if he could not land a hit. Li Qingshan could block the swords of regular Dragon's Gate disciples, but he could not block the sword of a mighty second-rate master like him. Li Qingshan understood this extremely well, and he could clearly sense that the sword Yang Anji carried was different from the fine steel swords regular disciples carried. However, against an opponent like that, fleeing was impossible. All he could do was face him head-on. The two of them faced off, and the restaurant suddenly fell silent. The killing intent was suffocating. Clang. Yang Anji drew his sword from its sheath, and a cold glow swept towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. The blade actually shone with a faint layer of light, just like the knife he had obtained today. The person had a name, and so did the sword. This was a famed sword that everyone in Qingyang City knew about. The Soaring Dragon Sword was a treasured sword that had been passed down through the Dragon's Gate sect for several generations. Only the sect master had the right to wield it. The person was powerful with a name, and the sword was sharp with a name. Even in the hands of regular people, the sword could slice through metal like mud. In the hands of a true swordsman, it would be a true murder weapon. This is a spiritual artifact. Returning to before the banquet, Oxen said as he looked at the knife in Li Qingshan's hand. What's a spiritual artifact? Li Qingshan fiddled around with the knife in his hand. Have I really picked up a treasure? In his previous life, he had often read about such things in novels. They would randomly stroll around a grocery store and pick up a peerless divine artifact. From then on, they would be able to kill anything that stood in their way. Oxen smiled disdainfully, shattering his fantasy. This item barely has a layer of spiritual chi attached to it, so it can't even be considered a low-tier spiritual tool. It's most likely used by apprentices who have just started learning tool forging. However, at your level, it can be considered a treasure. However, the ridicule in the ox's eyes became more and more intense. This thing could only be used as a flying knife. Whether it was a cultivator or an ordinary martial artist, it was a useless piece of trash. Li Qingshan carefully put away the knife. This was the first spiritual tool that he had obtained. It had a great commemorative value. After all, it was considered a rare item. However, he did not expect to see another one in the blink of an eye, and it was in the hands of the enemy. The shopkeeper of the Arsenal of Arms was also among the aristocrats. While the other aristocrats were fleeing in panic, he stared at the flying dragon sword with infatuation. If this sword was in the Arsenal of Arms, even if Li Qingshan took out all of his silver and knelt on the ground to beg him, he would not sell it. Just when everyone thought that Li Qingshan would charge forward like just now, he rolled to the side to avoid the sharp edge of the sword and arrived at a corner of the restaurant. Yang Anji changed his moves even faster. With a flick of his wrist, the light of the sword moved like a shadow, pressing towards Li Qingshan. Separated by a few feet, the cold air pierced Li Qingshan's skin, making him feel cold. Wherever the two went, the aristocrats all screamed and ran, thinking that they were going to be used as meat shields. Li Qingshan was not that shameless. He reached out and grabbed a square table, using it as a weapon. The large square table was as light as a feather in his hands. A strong wind blew and the candles flickered. Yang Anji did not put this power in his eyes at all. Wherever the light of the sword passed, the square table was cut into pieces like tofu. In the blink of an eye, only one leg of the table was left in Li Qingshan's hands. Li Qingshan seemed to be at his wit's end and threw the table leg out. Perhaps it was because he was panicking, but he missed and it flew past Yang Anji's head. Yang Anji's sword was like a rainbow. Li Qingshan's back was pressed against the wall, unable to retreat or dodge. The restaurant suddenly became pitch black. The table leg that flew out from Li Qingshan's hands struck down the last light. Trying to escape. It's too late. Yang Anji shouted. However, he did not see that when the darkness descended, Li Qingshan's face did not show panic, but a smile. Bang! Li Qingshan clapped his palms together and caught the flying dragon sword in a hair's breadth. Yang Anji sneered. It was wishful thinking for him to catch the sword with brute force while he was flying forward. The sword's edge suddenly pierced forward. As the sword and palm rubbed against each other, an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing could be heard. The tip of the sword was only 3 inches away from Li Qingshan's throat. Yang Anji's expression suddenly changed. A cold wind came from the back of his head, making him feel a life-and-death crisis that he had not felt for many years. This is impossible. This was the first thought that came to his mind. Although he could not see, his other senses were still there. Someone was so close behind him. How could he not sense it? How strong was the Qing Gong? Could it be a hidden weapon? If the lights in the restaurant were still on, everyone would be able to see a small knife flying towards the back of Yang Anji's head. It really did look like a hidden weapon. However, if someone could open their spirit eye like Li Qingshan, they would see that the small knife fitted perfectly in Little An's clean, white hand. Little An cultivated the path of white bone and great beauty and bathed himself in fresh blood every day, so he was no longer afraid of blood and qi at this level. He could truly get close to experts, but he still lacked a suitable weapon. If he used a regular hunting knife, with Yang Anji's strength, even if he did not train in external martial arts, his protective inner energy would still be able to knock the knife away. It would be difficult for him to deal any fatal damage. However, things were different now. In Little An's hands, the spiritual knife was not just a piece of trash. Instead, it was a divine weapon for assassination. Li Qingshan had used himself as bait to lure Yang Anji here. He and Little An had not made any prior preparations, nor had they communicated with each other. They had absolute trust in each other, and as expected, Little An did not disappoint him. Their cooperation was perfect. Yang Anji was also impressive. He lowered his head and dodged the knife in the nick of time. The blade practically scraped his scalp. He was shocked, but he did not panic. As long as he continued to exert force and killed Li Qingshan, he would be able to deal with the hidden weapon expert behind him with ease. The small knife suddenly turned and stabbed downwards. It was not a hidden weapon. Yang Anji's mind was immediately thrown into disarray. This was because he still had not sensed the presence of a living person behind him. A chill rose up in his heart. He ignored everything else and tried to pull back his sword to defend himself. Li Qingshan bit down on the tip of the sword with both hands and snickered coldly. It was easy to stab, but the first thing to be pierced would definitely be your head. Want to pull back? Then don't even think about it. As long as the sword existed, the person existed. This was probably a lesson that every swordsman had learned, not to mention that this was a treasured sword passed down from their ancestors. The sword was left in Li Qingshan's hand, but he was sent flying with extremely graceful movements. He could no longer be graceful. His hair was disheveled and he looked extremely pathetic. And all of this happened in the blink of an eye. From the moment Yang Anji swung his sword, forced Li Qingshan to the wall, and then retreated after being assassinated, only a few breaths of time had passed. The aristocrats were all panicking and could not react in time. Only Lu Hong sniffed and smelled blood. His heart was filled with shock. Yang Anji was injured? How did this brat injure him? At the last moment, Yang Anji had decisively abandoned his sword, but he had also paid a heavy price. Little An still used the spiritual knife to pull out a foot-long wound on his back. Fresh blood was flowing out. Li Qingshan had some admiration for his decisiveness. For the first time, he experienced the emotions described in the books. Even if they were mortal enemies and wanted to kill each other at all costs, they would still be shocked by the skills displayed by the opponent during the confrontation. However, in a battle, he would not be entangled in such emotions, nor would he be entangled in all the right and wrong. Since they had become mortal enemies, killing the other party at all costs was the right thing to do. Chapter 53. The Descending Tiger. Yang Anji suddenly thought of the nickname he had originally looked down on, the Descending Tiger, Li Qingshan. Now, what was lunging at him was not a human, but a ferocious beast bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. Having lost his treasured sword, he was like a child, unable to fight back. He retreated rapidly. The chilly wind swirled up from behind him once again, taking his life. Li Qingshan no longer had any qualms. He swung the ox demon's fist of great strength as he pleased, unleashing a powerful gust of wind. It forced Yang Anji to dodge everywhere. Little An, who danced about in the darkness, was everywhere, vicious and insidious. One was tough and the other soft, one yang and one yin. They worked together wonderfully. Yang Anji was impressive as well. Although he was injured, he still used his supreme movement technique to move about and dodge. However, a few more wounds appeared on his body, and the blood on his back flowed even more profusely. The smell of blood was so heavy that even regular people could smell it. "Where is Li Qingshan?" Suddenly, there was an explosive bellow from downstairs. It was filled with powerful inner force, so loud that it was like a clap of thunder. Over a dozen torches rose up, illuminating the upper floor. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He signaled to little An, and the dagger immediately flew back into his sleeves. He did not want anyone to know about this secret for now. Only then did everyone see Yang Anji's appearance. They were all stunned speechless. Before the torches were extinguished, Yang Anji had been unstoppable, almost about to kill Li Qingshan. This was in line with their understanding. No matter how powerful Li Qingshan was, he was still a first-rate figure in the Qingyang Society of Martial Arts. However, in the blink of an eye, Yang Anji had actually been defeated, and he had been defeated so miserably. Yang Anji recovered his sight as well. He retreated to Yang Jun's side. His face was pale, and his expression was vicious. He wanted to skin Li Qingshan alive. He grabbed Yang Jun and broke out of the window. Li Qingshan said that it was a pity, but he didn't care too much. He stepped onto the windowsill and looked down. Li Qingshan is here. At first glance, he saw the black bear's tall and strong figure, and the black bear also saw him. Their eyes met and sparks flew. "Xianxia Wu!" Lu Hong exclaimed. Although his foundation was in Qingyang City, he had met this vicious person once before. "The Black Wind Mountain bandits have entered the city," someone shouted. First, the aristocrats in the restaurant fell into chaos. Then, the shouts spread far and wide. Li Qingshan gazed over from the tall building. All he saw was that the entire Qingyang city seemed to be in a state of panic. Xianxia Wu also stared at Yang Anji in shock. The two of them had received the news together and rushed over to Qingyang City. One wanted revenge, while the other wanted to steal the spiritual ginseng. The Dragon's Gate sect used their superior movement technique to arrive first. They wanted to take the spiritual ginseng and avoid any accidents. Li Qingshan had been silenced by the Black Wind stronghold, which only demonstrated that Yang Anji's "I didn't want to harm you in the first place" was just bullshit. However, Li Qingshan's strength had exceeded everyone's expectations. Yang Anji said, "This kid's martial arts are no weaker than yours or mine, and he still has dirty tricks up his sleeve. Be careful, Stronghold Master." Originally, he did not want to have too much to do with the Black Wind stronghold, but now, all of Li Qingshan's enemies were his friends. The Dragon's Gate sect has colluded with the Black Wind stronghold to attack Qingyang City. Everyone here is a witness. Li Qingshan used true qi to project his voice into the distance. Yang Anji shuddered. He ground his teeth. "Li Qingshan, I will never forgive you." That single sentence stripped the Dragon's Gate sect of their reputation as a righteous sect, reducing them to the status of accomplices of bandits. If you're bold enough to do it, then don't be afraid of others talking about it. Alright. Stronghold Master Xiong, you've delivered yourself to me. You've saved me quite a bit of trouble. Li Qingshan wrapped his hand around Xianxia Wu, trapping him within. Taking advantage of the defeat of the Dragon's Gate sect, he said that with great pride. "How bold of you!" Xianxia Wu's face changed. He leapt up and flew towards Li Qingshan. With his huge body, his movement technique was actually quite impressive. Just when Li Qingshan was about to strike, a figure flashed past him. Lu Hong used the charge of the Iron Cavalry to forcefully clash with Xianxia and Wuxia in the air. Xianxia and Wuxia landed heavily on the ground, while Lu Hong used the force to return upstairs. Blood surged through both of their faces. Xianxia and Wuxia was furious. "You!" Lu Hong said, "Stronghold Master Xiong has come to Qingyang City to make a mess. Aren't you showing me no respect?" Just like how every wild beast had their own territory, the people of the Jianghu treated this with even greater importance than wild beasts. They would never allow others to trespass on it. The actions of the Black Wind stronghold had already displeased him as a local tyrant. Of course, if he were a regular person, Lu Hong might not have been willing to stand up for Xianxia and Wuxia when he had mobilized so many people. However, just now, Li Qingshan had already demonstrated the strength to make others help him. The second boss, who was dressed like a scholar, said with a sunken voice, "The Iron Fist is opposing our Black Wind stronghold. Aren't you afraid of the destruction of your entire sect?" Lu Hong called out, "Where are the disciples of the Iron Fist?" With that, figures surged out from the streets and alleyways surrounding the restaurant. They were all disciples of the Iron Fist. They had rushed over after hearing the news. With a single call, hundreds of people responded, and their bearing surpassed Li Qingshan's. The reason why the people of the Jianghu could behave so arrogantly in their own territory was not just because of their martial arts, but also because of the powerful organization behind them. Even if Xianxia and Wuxia and Yang Anji worked together, they would have to think twice. Yang Anji suddenly said in a loud voice, "Sect Master Lu, don't you want to know what I'm here for?" Lu Hong raised his eyebrows, showing an interested expression. However, Li Qingshan frowned, but he could not stop Yang Anji from speaking. "It's for a stalk of spiritual ginseng that appeared in the Bailao Peak. As long as a martial artist absorbs a little of its medicinal properties, their martial arts will improve greatly, and they will have a high chance of advancing to the innate realm. Now that it's in his hands, his martial arts can improve so quickly." Yang Anji pointed at Li Qingshan, his face full of viciousness. He had revealed the location of the spiritual ginseng in front of hundreds of people, and the news would definitely spread like wildfire. At that time, countless people in the Jianghu who longed for the spiritual ginseng would gather like beasts smelling blood. No matter how strong Li Qingshan was, he would be torn to pieces. Everyone's eyes involuntarily looked at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan lowered his eyebrows and did not say anything. He knew that it was futile to defend himself. His martial arts undoubtedly confirmed Yang Anji's words. The worst-case scenario he was worried about had happened, but his heart did not become flustered. Instead, it was unexpectedly calm. "I'm already so old. I don't want to improve my martial arts and dominate the martial arts world." As Lu Hong said so, his eyes were searching Li Qingshan's body. Obviously, he did not mean what he said. There was no one in the martial arts world who did not want to improve their martial arts. The spiritual ginseng also has the effect of prolonging life. Don't you care, sect leader Lu? As long as you give the order to capture this brat, the spiritual ginseng will be yours. At that time, Stronghold Master Xiong and I will only seek revenge. We will not fight for the spiritual ginseng. Besides, we won't be able to fight for it even if we want to. Yang Anji demonstrated the terrifying aspects of a sect leader other than martial arts. As expected, Lu Hong was very tempted. Xiangwu's eyes also lit up. No one knew what he was thinking. In the blink of an eye, it was Li Qingshan who faced everyone again. His eyes were calm, but his mind was anxiously thinking of a way to escape. He did not think that Lu Hong would have any sense of loyalty toward him. Wasn't the reason he was in such a situation because he believed in loyalty? Of course, this was not a hopeless situation. As long as he was willing to give up the spiritual ginseng, he could naturally escape easily. However, he would not do that unless he had no other choice. The magical power of the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers did not focus on qi refinement. The spiritual ginseng could be said to be the greatest guarantee for him to become a so-called innate master. The stalemate was broken very soon. Xianxia bellowed out and flew up the stairs again. Lu Hong lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. He did not move at all. At the very least, it was not impossible for him to make up his mind to watch from the sidelines or even kick him when he was down. Yang Anji used this opportunity to apply some golden salve and control his wounds. He was about to strike. Just as Li Qingshan was about to be surrounded by two great masters of Qingyang, his muscles tensed up. He was ready to strike. Chapter 54. Xianxia half knelt on the ground in a sorry state. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the top of the restaurant. A tall figure stood there, and the bowstring of the great bow in his hand was still trembling. Although it was not as good as the stone-splitter bow, it was still a rare, hard, metal bow. His eyes narrowed. Huang Binggu. Huang Binggu said, "Stronghold Master Xiong, this arrow is just a greeting. I hope you know how to retreat, or don't blame me for being merciless." Xianxia broke out in a cold sweat. He knew that Huang Binggu was not boasting. Just now, if Huang Binggu struck out with his full strength, it was extremely likely for him to be shot to death on the spot since he could not turn around in the air. A divine archer who occupied an advantageous position and launched sneak attacks was just too terrifying. Yang Anji said, "You really want to stand up for this kid?" Huang Binggu said, "The spiritual ginseng was indeed found by Li Qingshan, but I've already consumed it and cured my chronic illness of many years." "Sect Master Yang, you found the wrong person." Behind him stood over a dozen headhunters and over a dozen powerful bows. The four leading figures of the martial arts community of Qingyang had appeared together, all for the sake of Li Qingshan, whether they were friend or foe. The disciples of the Iron Fist sect were all amazed, while the nearby residents mustered up their courage and opened a sliver of a window, secretly watching this rare sight. The torches danced wildly in the cold wind. Yang Anji, Xianxia, Lu Hong, Huang Binggu, and Li Qingshan's expressions flickered. However, they seemed to be frozen without moving. Each of them had their own worries and considerations, holding each other back. No one dared to strike out carelessly. Li Qingshan suddenly laughed aloud. His laughter traveled very far in the cold wind. "Stronghold Master Xiong, this is your only chance to kill me. Why don't you do it? Once I personally kill you, the macaques under your command will still have the opportunity to flee. If you miss out on this opportunity today, I'll just come back in the future and uproot your Black Wind stronghold, leaving not a single one alive." Arrogant. When everyone present heard this, they felt that it was an ear-piercing arrogance. The Black Wind stronghold had wreaked havoc in Qingyang for many years. Apart from the Drawn Reins village who stood aloof from worldly affairs, the Dragon's Gate sect and Iron Fist both wanted to destroy them very much. However, Yang Anji and Lu Hong had both considered that they only had a chance if they worked together. However, even if they succeeded, they would have to pay a heavy price. But now, Li Qingshan actually said that he wanted to destroy the Black Wind stronghold by himself. Even though he had a good opinion of his martial arts, he still felt that he was too arrogant and ignorant. Xiangu's face bordered on fury, becoming more and more like a black bear. "Then I'll be waiting for you. If you don't come, I'll make sure not a single person in Crouching Ox Village survives." In the end, he threw down a vicious threat. "No matter who it is that dares to help you, I'll exterminate their entire clan." He left in a hurry with his people. The disciples of the Iron Fist stepped aside and did not stop him. A group of bandits actually treated the entire Qingyang city like it did not exist. They really were lawless. Yang Anji also used his movement technique and vanished into the night. His voice rang out from afar, "Just you wait, Li Qingshan. Your enemies will only increase. Your death won't be far away." Lu Hong clasped his hands at Li Qingshan and left with his people. Meanwhile, the aristocrats were willing to donate 10 times the amount of money for suppressing bandits as long as they spared the disciples of the Dragon's Gate sect and did not involve them. The messy restaurant had already become empty. Only Li Qingshan stood by the window, holding the soaring dragon sword he had obtained from Yang Anji. Huang Binggu brought people over. Li Qingshan turned around and said, Hunting Chief Huang, I want an explanation. Two hunters brought over Xiaohei who had been tied up firmly. Huang Bingu said, kneel and speak. Xiaohei told him the entire story in detail. In the end he said, just kill me. I won't regret it. Huang Bingu said with difficulty, I've watched Xiaohei grow up. I can only blame my lack of discipline for this. Please spare him this time. He drew the hunting blade from his waist and stabbed it into his own shoulder. Hunting Chief. Xiaohei said in a hurry. Xiaohei, there are some things that you can't do. I, Huang Bingu, have killed countless people in my life, but I've never been ungrateful, nor have I ever repaid kindness with enmity. Huang Bingu extended his hand, and the hunting chief behind him handed another hunting blade to him with a pained expression. Huang Bingu stabbed it into his left shoulder. Tears streamed down Xiaohei's face. He was filled with shame and regret. Ever since he was young, his respect and admiration for this man surpassed even his father's, yet now he had to watch him suffer for him. Huang Bingu stabbed the hunting blade into his chest. 3 blades and 6 holes, a life for a life. This was the explanation that a person of the Jianghu could give. A hand firmly grabbed Huang Bingu's wrist, and the blade could not stab any further. Li Qingshan was stunned at first before coming to an understanding. The hunting chief wants to take all the blame for this and then end it all with his death? It's useless. Even if they are skeptical, they will still come to me. Huang Bingu let out a heavy sigh. As someone who had traveled the Jianghu, he knew how terrifying this matter was. A secret manual or a treasured sword could stir up a sea of blood in the Jianghu. The lives of those first-rate or even super-rate experts were all used as if they were worthless. The red glow in Li Qingshan's eyes disappeared, and he actually revealed a smile. It was not a wild laugh, but a hearty one like a normal youth. But I'm not afraid of them. These words were said in a hearty and confident manner. Without waiting for Huang Bingu to remind him, he continued, Is my tiger bone wine ready? I'll have someone send it over tomorrow. Li Qingshan said no more and walked down the stairs. When he was outside the building, he suddenly felt a chill on his face. Raising his head, he saw snowflakes drifting down from the pitch-black sky. A clear shadow flew out from the locust wood tablet and danced around him. Li Qingshan said to himself, I'm not afraid of enemies, I'm afraid of betrayal. He saw Little and looking at him with a confused expression. He could not help but laugh. You won't understand even if I tell you. In any case, you won't betray me, right? Little and might not understand the meaning of betrayal in Li Qingshan's words, but he understood the anticipation in his eyes and hurriedly nodded. Let's go. Tonight isn't over yet. Li Qingshan's eyes burned with a raging flame, as if it could melt this world of ice and snow. Old Knickers drank a mouthful of aged wine and turned on the charcoal in the stove to resist the pervasive winter chill. He had never had a wife in his life and had been the armory guard for several decades. His neighbors had all forgotten his name, only remembering that his surname was Zhang. They all called him Old Zhang or Old Cutoff. Then, for some reason, the children around him began to call him Old Knickers, causing this old man who had been single his entire life to be tainted with a bit of vulgarity for no reason. It was already very late at night, but he still had not slept. As usual, he reviewed his life, as if he was ruminating on the most brilliant parts of his memories, chewing them over and over again while he was tipsy. As for whether these memories were real or fake, they were just like his name. Not only bystanders, but even he himself had no way of distinguishing them. Thump, thump, thump. Several loud noises interrupted his recollection. He unhappily opened the door. Who is it? Why is it so late? Then he saw a teenager standing in front of the door, giving him an apologetic smile. The county magistrate, Lord Yi, sent me to the armory to retrieve a few things. This is the document. Old Knickers shivered all over. Although there were many false parts in his memories, at least some of them were real. He had really been a soldier and fought in battle, and he had seen the scene of real swords and guns being used to kill people. Although the teenager before him was very young and amiable, he smelled a familiar aura, murderous intent. Murderous intent lingered. It was a feeling that only fierce soldiers who had taken dozens of lives in the army would have. If he encountered such an enemy in battle, he would definitely stay as far away from him as possible. He did not even look at the document in detail. With trembling hands, he took out the key, picked up the lantern, and opened the armory door. The armory door was about 3 meters tall, forged from pig iron. 36 iron nails were lined up neatly, and a pair of tiger heads had iron rings in their mouths. Old Knickers forcefully pushed a few times, but the door did not budge. He awkwardly said, "It seems to be frozen." The teenager placed his hand on the cold iron door and gave it a light push. The iron door opened with a rumble, and he stepped into the armory alone. Old Knickers shrunk his body and waited outside the door. Over the past few years, this was the first time someone had come to the armory to retrieve something. What did he want? And what did he want to do with it? While he was thinking, he heard a clanging sound coming from afar. A figure stepped out of the armory. The black armor wrapped around his sturdy body, giving off a cold and murderous feeling. The armor's skirt fluttered along with his movements. Chapter 55. Li Qingshan patted the 3 quiver of arrows on his waist and carried the soaring dragon sword and stone splitter bow on his back. He rested the shockingly heavy and extraordinarily large tyrant's spear on his shoulder and vanished into the snowy darkness. All he left behind was a string of deep footprints in the snow. In the yamen, the advisor said to Yichuan, "Sir, Li Qingshan won't listen to your advice. There's nothing we can do." As it turned out, Yichuan saw how the aristocrats refused to assist him due to the Black Wind Stronghold's influence. He calculated that he would definitely lose against 200 people alone, so he tried to persuade Li Qingshan to stay and think things over. However, how could Li Qingshan listen to him? He forcefully took the documents and left. Yi Dachuan paced around the room. Suddenly, he stopped and stamped his foot. "Gather people for me?" The advisor said in a troubled tone. "How do we have people?" Yi Dachuan bellowed anxiously. "Those country bumpkins actually dared to get their disciples to kill an official rite in front of me. The Dragon's Gate sect is a den of thieves. Tell them that whoever refuses to send anyone is a traitor." He understood now. If Li Qingshan died, then he could no longer be the district magistrate. The Black Wind Stronghold and the Dragon's Gate sect might even vent their anger on him. The advisor said, "Sir, please reconsider." If he did that, he would offend all of the aristocrats of Qingyang. Yi Dachuan kicked him in the bottom. "Why aren't you going?" The advisor could only obey. As soon as he left the hall, over a dozen pitch-black figures blocked his way. He had no idea when they had entered the yamen. The advisor was surprised. Using the weak lantern light in the hall to look over, he saw that the dozen or so people all had bows and arrows on their backs. So it's the Drawn Reins village. "Good men, what business do you have visiting so late at night?" Huang Bingu's shoulder was wrapped in white cloth, but his bearing remained steady. He patted the advisor's shoulder and said, "Sir Yi, Huang Bingu of the Drawn Reins village is willing to lend a hand." After Li Qingshan left, Huang Bingu and the others found an inn to rest. Before they had even fallen asleep, they received news that Li Qingshan had left the city in full armor. Of course, Huang Bingu would not think that he was running away. He suddenly stood up and said, "I'm going out for a while. When I'm not around, Little Black will be in charge of everything." Everyone knew where he was going. Xiaohei said, "Chief Hunter, we'll go with you." After experiencing this, his face lost a lot of the frivolous childishness of youth and gained a lot of the steadiness of an adult. "Prioritize the village." Xiaohei said, "The name of Drawn Reins village was not obtained by compromising. We have formed a great grudge with the Black Wind Stronghold, so we will definitely not be able to live in peace for long. We can only place our bets on that person. If you want me to take responsibility, then this is my idea." Huang Bingu said, "Good. I didn't suffer those 2 slashes for nothing today." Qingyang City that had just quietened down became noisy once more. In Iron Fist, Iron Lion Lu Hong was also awake. Instead, he was thinking about everything that had happened today. Li Long stepped through the door and knelt down. Master. Lu Hong frowned. What are you doing? Li Long said, Please save the Crouching Ox village, Master. The Black Wind stronghold had not massacred the village before because they wanted to capture Li Qingshan, the main culprit, first, and also because of his connection with Iron Fist, which was why they had not struck so easily. However, after tonight, everyone would fall out with each other. The Black Wind stronghold would definitely take revenge madly. They would definitely swing their blades. Lu Hong said, Go fetch your father's family and caretaker Lu's family. However, Li Long remained kneeling. Please save the Crouching Ox village, Master. Didn't you dislike that place? But that's my hometown. Lu Hong sank into his thoughts for a while as if he was considering the pros and cons of every aspect. Suddenly he stood up. Go, gather the disciples. He had already considered the spiritual ginseng that Li Qingshan had brought with him and the wealth of the Black Wind stronghold. Li Long was overjoyed. Thank you, Master. Yi Dechuan used his position as district magistrate and borrowed Li Qingshan's prestige and the might of the Drawn Reins village to order the aristocrats to send people. However, there were still some aristocrats who resisted, unwilling to send people. Just as Huang Binggu furrowed his brows and considered whether he should kill them to establish his authority, Lu Hong strode over. He clasped his hands. Hunting Chief Huang, I've heard a lot about you. Afterwards, he said to the aristocrats who resisted, Today I, Lu Hong, swear that I will eliminate a great threat for Qingyang City. If you are willing to assist me, I, Lu Hong, will never forget. What he was trying to say was, even if you are unwilling, I will never forget. Given the current situation, the aristocrats finally dared not resist forcefully anymore. They sent people over reluctantly. Although they were reluctant, they did their best when they sent people. Xianxia words lingered in their ears. If they did not kill the snake this time, they would be waiting for revenge. As a result, they could only do their best. And with two powerful people like Huang Binggu and Lu Hong watching over them, they really did feel like they had an opportunity to flatten the Black Wind stronghold. The Black Wind stronghold wreaking havoc was not completely unrelated to them. Just like caretaker Lu's nickname, Half-Village Lu, most of the land in Qingyang City had been annexed by these aristocrats and local tyrants. Many of the villages that the Black Wind stronghold had plundered were their assets. As for kidnapping and demanding ransoms, who knew how much they had done? Otherwise, they would never have been willing to collect money from the previous district magistrates for suppressing bandits. Xianxia had never thought that his threat would instead force the aristocrats into becoming mortal enemies. Yi Dechuan gazed at the people who had gathered in disbelief. It had completely exceeded his initial expectations. There were actually 400 or 500 people. He watched over them in the center with his identity as the district magistrate, while Huang Binggu and Lu Hong commanded him. He had never done something so valiant in his life. His heart that had been blinded by fame and fortune actually began to burn with a sense of bloodlust. The advisor was dumbfounded as well. He thought of a phrase written in a book that was originally very distant from him. With a call from above, followers will gather, and the entire world will rebel. Perhaps all that was needed in the world was a single warrior, a single hero, and they would be able to turn the impossible into the possible, guiding everyone and completing so-called miracles. However, this hero who led the way would usually not have a good outcome. Old Knickers opened the door to the armory with trembling hands. Armor and weapons were taken out one by one, equipping this group of bandits. With a clang, they set off on their journey. Huang Binggu thought, hopefully I can make it in time. This gathering had already taken up far too much time. Lu Hong thought, kid, you better hold on a little longer. Though, if you die, I'll avenge you. Li Qingshan advanced quickly in the darkness. His equipment weighed 100 or 200 kilograms, but not only did it not make him feel like it was tiring, but it instead gave him the pleasure of releasing his strength. His armor was cold, but his blood burned hotter and hotter. His footsteps became faster and faster, and in the end, he was practically sprinting through the wilderness. His heavy footsteps were like war drums, thumping loudly. He did not know how long he had walked in the deep mountains and old forests, but his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. His gaze pierced through the wind and snow like a sharp sword, shooting towards the ravine. A stronghold was creeping in the darkness, and a few faint lights could be seen. The Black Wind stronghold was right in front of him. However, Li Qingshan was in no hurry to go forward. He untied the wine gourd and drank it all in one gulp. The strength he had expended instantly recovered, and there was even a scorching aura rampaging through his body like a wild horse. Chapter 56. The assembly hall of the Black Wind stronghold was brightly lit. The important figures of the stronghold gathered together, currently discussing the matter regarding Li Qingshan. First boss, what do we do now? The kid is currently hiding in Qingyang City, and he's under Huang Binga's protection. Yang Anji has spread the news of the spiritual ginseng. Who can protect him? He'll die sooner or later. If he dies to someone else, our Black Wind stronghold won't be able to regain our prestige, and the spiritual ginseng will end up in someone else's hands too, said the scholarly second boss. Sure enough, Xiangu's eyelids twitched. His desire for the spiritual ginseng was no less than anyone else's. Didn't he say he'd come himself? By then, I'll smash him to a pulp. The seventh boss was a bald fatty. His face was vicious as he swung the huge hammer in his hand. The bosses all looked at one another and sneered, "Seventh brother, only you believe he'll come." As long as they had some brains, they would never believe someone would actually be bold enough to barge into their Black Wind stronghold alone. If he doesn't want to come, we'll force him to come. Although the snow has sealed off the mountains, making it inconvenient for us to mobilize on a large scale, we just need to send a group of people, and it'll be enough to slaughter the Crouching Ox village and regain the prestige of the Black Wind stronghold. By then, we'll find a few relatives and friends who are close to him and slice them off. We'll send them over piece by piece. I refuse to believe he'll still be able to sit still. The second boss revealed his vicious plan. The bosses all cheered, praising him greatly. The second boss smiled proudly as well. Thump! With a great sound, the entire stronghold seemed to shake. A bandit rushed in and said, "Oh no, boss. Someone's smashing at the stronghold gate." In front of the stronghold, over a dozen bandits guarding the gate stared at it in fear. The gate, made from a few thick logs, was unable to give them any sense of security at all. Thump! Another great sound rang out. The logs trembled and splinters flew into the air as if a huge beast wanted to barge in. Under the constant, violent collisions, the gate caved in and cracked. Boom! The huge logs scattered, and a piece of wood struck a bandit in the chest. He immediately vomited blood and collapsed. However, the mountain bandits did not have the time to pay attention to their companions. Instead, they stared blankly at the entrance. A tall figure stepped into the Black Wind stronghold amidst the wind, snow, and dust. Stop right there, this is Black. A bandit who seemed to be the leader of the group endured the fear in his heart and spoke, but before he could finish speaking, an arrow shot out from the smoke and dust, ending his words and life. Li Qingshan raised his stone-splitter bow and said calmly, "I know." When the dust settled, the bandits discovered that there was no army or huge beasts standing in front of the stronghold gate. Instead, there was only a young man wearing iron armor and holding a large bow. The fear in their hearts immediately faded a lot. Someone brandished his saber and shouted, "He's only one person. Everyone, let's attack together and kill him. The stronghold master will reward us handsomely." More than a dozen bandits wielding all sorts of weapons howled as they charged forward. Li Qingshan calmly took out 3 arrows from his quiver and knocked them on the bowstring. In an instant he pulled the bowstring to its fullest. The bowstring hummed, and the sharp arrows pierced through the 3 bandits at the front with the force of splitting rocks and piercing clouds. They fell to the ground like puppets with their strings cut. Li Qingshan drew his bow like a spring and shot out arrows, killing 12 bandits in a row. "I'll kill you!" There were still 4 bandits who charged forward, roaring as they slashed at Li Qingshan's head. Li Qingshan put away his bow and continued forward as if he did not see them. A whirlwind spun around him, carrying with it the sharp edge of a blade. The 4 bandits simultaneously spat out blood from their throats and fell to the ground. One of the bandits was skilled, and when he saw the small blade, he wanted to block it with his saber. However, the small blade cut through his saber like it was tofu. Li Qingshan stepped over the corpses of more than a dozen bandits and continued forward. Finally, he stopped at the empty space in the middle of the stronghold. He saw bandits rushing out from the barracks of every stronghold when they heard the news. They all held torches in their hands, and they were extremely eye-catching in the darkness. He drew his bow and shot out arrows in rapid succession, each one faster than the one before. The effects of the spiritual wine gradually took effect in his body, and he became slightly tipsy. However, it was as if the gods were helping him, and not a single arrow missed its mark. The Hall of Honor landed at the highest point of the Black Wind stronghold. The leaders of the Black Wind stronghold rushed out of the Hall of Honor and looked down from the platform. All of them exclaimed in surprise, "He actually dared to come? And he came so quickly." Li Qingshan suddenly saw that the bandits were no longer charging forward, but were retreating in an orderly manner. He raised his head and saw Xianxia and Wuxia. He laughed loudly, "Stronghold Master Xiong, a guest has come, and you, as the host, are so slow. I couldn't wait any longer, so I killed a few dozen of your minions to relieve my boredom. You won't blame me, right?" A gust of true qi gushed out, and the laughter traveled 10 miles, echoing through the mountains and drowning out the sound of the wind and snow. It sounded like thunder in the ears of the bandits, and those who were weaker immediately fell to the ground with cries of pain, blood flowing from their ears. "I accidentally killed a few more." Li Qingshan covered his mouth and burped. The bandits were shocked, and Xiangu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The strength of Li Qingshan's inner force was far beyond his imagination, and it seemed to be even more exquisite than normal inner force. It was definitely not like the rumors said, that he was just an external martial arts master. This must be the effect of the spiritual ginseng. This day next year will be the day you die. No, I will capture you alive and torture you for 7 days and 7 nights. Li Qingshan laughed loudly, "I don't have the leisure to deal with you. Quickly come down and accept your death." He raised his hand to draw his bow, and the smile on his face disappeared. His right hand turned into a blur, and he mechanically executed the action of drawing an arrow. 7 arrows formed a line. It was the rapid arrow technique that he had learned from Drawn Rain's village, and he shot it towards the platform. Dodge! Xiangu's warning was too slow. One of the bandits was hit, and he fell from the platform. There were 3 arrows stuck in his body, and he only managed to dodge the first 4. 6th boss! The bandits cried out in alarm. Li Qingshan touched his bow again, and found that all 3 quivers had been used up. He tossed the large bow and quiver to the side. He has no more arrows. Everyone, don't be afraid, kill him. The bandits bellowed out to boost their morale. They swarmed over like a black mass, forming an impenetrable encirclement. Layers upon layers of figures and weapons surged over, drowning Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan hooked the Overlord's spear at his feet, and with a clang, he placed it on his shoulder. He spun around like a whirlwind, and the 140-gene Overlord's spear danced like a black dragon, carrying with it a low hum as it tore through the air. 5 bandits were sent flying at the same time, either their heads exploded or their chests were crushed. They could not be more dead. With Li Qingshan's lethal weapon in hand, he was basically a walking death trap. He would never leave a single person alive. The bandits behind him were smashed into the ground, and there was also a series of groans and cries. Li Qingshan looked towards the platform. "Don't let your minions die for nothing. Quickly come and fight me." Xianxia and Wuxia looked at the casualties of his subordinates, but he did not have the slightest intention of making a move. Instead, he laughed coldly. "Fight you?" Looking down from above, he could clearly see a dozen or so bandits dressed in special clothing, mixed in with the crowd, approaching Li Qingshan. They did not raise their weapons like their comrades, but instead lowered them. Li Qingshan's heart trembled. A terrifying killing intent was like a venomous snake baring its fangs. And the experts that he would take seriously were clearly only on the platform. Before he could think carefully, the dozen or so bandits raised their hands and shouted, "Get out of the way!" Chapter 57. The bolts tore through the air. They were no weaker than the stone splitter bow. With a clang, they pierced the armor and stabbed into Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan immediately froze up. Xianxia sneered. Do you really think you're worthy of fighting me? Dying like this would be letting you off easy. He had gone to great lengths to obtain these crossbows. He had spent a great deal of time training these crossbowmen as well. They were the true trump cards of his Black Wind stronghold. He had gone too far. The other organizations of Qingyang City treated him as a thorn in their side. If they were not prepared, they would not be able to sleep at night. Even first-rate masters would struggle to escape death from the sneak attack of over a dozen crossbows. And then, Li Qingshan, who was supposed to be dead, suddenly raised his head and asked. The bolts struck the armor, but they failed to pierce his tendons. He had also become covered in cold sweat. If it were not for the armor, which nullified the force of impact, he definitely would not have been able to block the crossbows with his ox demon forges its hide. Even with that being the case, it took him quite a while to recover. Crossbows were truly a divine weapon for killing masters. Protect the crossbowmen. Fire again. The second boss ordered loudly. The bandits surged forward, and the crossbowmen changed their bolts in a hurry. Crossbows were easy to use, but they were nowhere near as fast as bows, so they were extremely easy to damage. However, with this kind of command, they could unleash their greatest power. They could command the bandits like an army. Total annihilation. How could Li Qingshan be willing to become a target? He identified the place with the most bandits and used the tyrant's spear style, charging over like a chariot. The might of the spear surged, sucking in over a dozen bandits. He was like a black dragon that had swallowed its prey in a single gulp. When it spat out again, it was over a dozen corpses. With just these people, how could they stop him? Before a crossbowman could even draw the bowstring, his chest was pierced by the spear. His 50-kilogram body was thrown into the air, slamming into another crossbowman in the distance and killing him. Li Qingshan became one with his spear and rushed left and right in the crowd. He only attacked and did not defend. When the swords, spears, swords, and halberds landed on his body, they were immediately repelled by his armor and could not harm him at all. When he swung his great spear, it pierced through the chest and head. In a short moment he had killed dozens of bandits, and more than half of the crossbowmen had been killed. He stood among the bandits, his iron armor pierced by more than 10 crossbow bolts and soaked in blood. A fierce and murderous aura arose spontaneously, scaring the bandits to death. One of the bandits tried to launch a sneak attack from behind. He turned around and glared at him, a red light flashing in his eyes. Before he could make a move, the bandit's face suddenly turned ashen, and he was scared to death. Xianxia heart ached and he flew into a rage. Even if he won this time, his vitality would be greatly damaged. The faces of the other leaders were also unsightly. This Li Qingshan's martial arts were so high that it could be said that it was beyond their imagination. The second leader said, "Leader, don't be anxious. This Li Qingshan has a great spear and armor. Although he looks invulnerable and powerful, he has to carry several hundred kilograms of weight. Even if his martial arts are high, he cannot last for long. Why don't we wait until he is tired and then make a move? We can just recruit more subordinates." In a battle between experts, it was rare for a battle to last for 3 days and 3 nights. In fact, it was rare for a battle to last for more than the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. This was because a battle was fierce and dangerous. One careless move could determine life and death. Martial artists had to burst out their physical strength and willpower in an instant, suppressing their opponent with a spurt of energy. Xianxia calmed his heart. He thought that even if it was him, after shooting the stone splitter bow dozens of times and charging with this kind of equipment, he would not be able to last long. Even if a person had great abilities, once their physical strength was exhausted, they would be at the mercy of others. This was the fearsomeness of a battle formation. It was not just a saying that ants could bite an elephant to death. However, who would have thought that not only was Li Qingshan not tired, he became more and more courageous as he fought. The gourd of spiritual wine he had drunk had a shocking medicinal effect. As it burned in his body, Energy continuously surged out. The overlord's spear in his hand turned into a blur. The spear moved with him as he killed to his heart's content. His entire body was bathed in blood. Furthermore, the ox demon's fist of great strength that he cultivated was not something that a mortal martial art could compare to. The thing that bulls were most praised for was not their strength, but their endurance. Seeing more and more bandits die and corpses litter the ground, the second leader's forehead was covered in sweat. What's going on? The snow was getting heavier and heavier. It was as big as a goose's feather as it fell to the ground, covering thousands of mountains. The bandits that fell towards Xianxia were immediately swept away by the fierce spear wind. A bandit was sent flying and landed on the ground, dyeing the snow red. The remaining bandits no longer had the slightest bit of ferocity and retreated in panic. Xianxia paused the spear in his hand. What a heavy snow! Xianxia decisively ordered. Attack! Together with the other leaders, they flew down together. The bandits' morale was immediately boosted. The seventh leader smashed down with his hammer. The air whistled, and before it even smashed down, it brought along a violent gust of wind. Its power was astonishing and terrifying. He was born with great strength that could kill tigers and bears. The second leader said, "Don't fight him head-on. Come at me." Xianxia used the move Overlord carries the cauldron, and the Overlord's spear swept upwards. Clang! A loud sound rang out as the hammer and spear collided. The hammer flew back and smashed into the seventh leader's head, causing his brain to burst out. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the fourth leader whipped at Xianxia's waist. The fifth leader used a demon-headed blade to hack at Xianxia's back. The second leader, however, used an iron fan to hide in the momentum and viciously pointed at the back of Xianxia's unguarded head. However, the most dangerous thing was still Xianxiangwu's palm that was reaching for his face. Even if Xianxia could block these attacks with his ox demon forges its hide and iron armor, the impact would still be unbearable. His body would slow down, and he would fall into a trap if he was not careful. He finally understood why even a veteran like Lu Hong's expression changed when he said he was going to flatten the Black Wind stronghold. He refused to believe it. The danger was unimaginably great. Ox Demon stomps the ground. An idea occurred to him. True Qi surged into his right foot, and he stomped heavily on the ground. Within a radius of 3 meters, a small earthquake occurred. The ground cracked and sunk, and shockwaves rolled in all directions. Martial arts focused on strength from the ground and rooting under one's feet. As long as one had not become an immortal that could ride the wind and soar the clouds, they would not be able to leave the ground under their feet. The attacks of the leaders were like the wind, but their feet were firmly planted on the ground. As soon as Xianxia's foot landed, they immediately became unsteady. They felt a shockwave attack their feet, and they felt dizzy and wanted to vomit blood. Their attacks were also scattered and powerless, and when they landed on Xianxia, they were no longer effective. Only Xianxiangwu's martial arts were the highest, and his palm and claws still maintained their power. Xianxia laughed and quickly retreated, avoiding Xianxiangwu's claws. He crashed into the fourth leader behind him, and at the same time, he stabbed his spear at Xianxiangwu's chest. The fourth leader screamed in pain. All the bones in his body were shattered, and he was sent flying. Xianxiangwu pulled back his palm and twisted his body, temporarily avoiding Xianxia's dragon-like spear. The fifth leader's martial arts were the weakest, and he had not recovered yet. Xianxia let go of the spear and grabbed his head, swinging it to the ground. With a bang, it was like a watermelon being split open, and red and white blood flowed out. He then pulled the Overlord's spear back and held it horizontally in front of him, assuming the stance of the Overlord's cross. In the blink of an eye, he had broken through the attacks of the Black Wind stronghold and even killed the 4 leaders. Third-rate experts were as weak as children in front of him, unable to withstand a single blow. The remaining bandits were stunned as if they had been immobilized. They did not expect their own stronghold to be so weak as the village they had wreaked havoc in. The snow was getting heavier, and the ground was dyed red with blood. Then it was covered in snow and frozen, forming a tragic scene of red and white. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, martial world, and tales of demons and gods.